Okafor, a sturdy man with hands roughened by years of hard work, lived with his beloved wife, Nneka, an only son, Chuka, in the heart of Umuofia village. Every morning, he ventured deep into the forest, his machete slicing through tall grasses as he searched for the best palm trees to tap for wine. Palm wine, his life sustenance, brought him not only a sense of pride but also the modest income that barely kept his family afloat. Yet as his debts piled up and his neighbors seemed to thrive, a spark of discontent took root in his heart. On a particular evening, after a long day in the forest, Okafor sat under the palm tree, lost in thought. He remembered stories of men who became rich overnight, men who seemed no different from him but now walked with their heads held high, adorned in fine clothes. It was then that he felt a pang of envy, a bitterness that no amount of palm wine could wash away. Why should I toil endlessly for pennies while others enjoy so much wealth? He wondered aloud. His musings were interrupted by a shadow that seemed to grow taller as it approached, a figure cloaked in darkness, with promises that would change everything. The shadowy figure was a man of peculiar presence, his skin pale and eyes piercing like burning coals. Okafor could not recall having seen him before, yet the man exuded an authority that demanded attention. "I have watched you, Okafor," the stranger intoned, his voice low and smooth. "You work tirelessly, yet you have little to show for it. Imagine a life where you need not labor under the sun, where your wealth overflows and respect follows you wherever you go." The offer stirred a sense of longing within Okafor, a desire he'd buried beneath years of struggle and sweat. Okafor hesitated, yet curiosity pulled him in. "And how would I gain such wealth?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The stranger's smile was cold and sharp. "There is a price, of course," he replied, his gaze settling on the small hut where Chuka slept peacefully. "Sacrifice," he continued, "is the pathway to riches. Are you willing to part with what you hold most dear?" Okafor's stomach churned. The stranger's words weighed heavily on his heart, casting shadows over the love he held for his only son. Though he nodded to feign interest, a seed of unease began to sprout within him. Days passed, yet Okafor could not escape the memory of that night. Every time he looked at Chuka, a pang of guilt and fear filled his chest. His young son was spirited and kind, always eager to learn from his father. Chuka would often accompany Okafor to the forest, eagerly watching as his father tapped the trees and poured the precious wine into large calabashes. "Father," Chuka had asked just the day before, "why do we work so hard?" Okafor had forced a smile, masking the turmoil within. "Because, my son, hard work is all a man has." But that night, as Okafor lay awake beside his sleeping wife, the allure of the stranger's promise whispered to him once more. "A man must provide," he thought, "and if I could secure our future without these endless days of labor, would it not be worth it?" The darkness seemed to deepen around him as he contemplated his choices, weighing his love for his son against the lure of a prosperous future. Okafor began to distance himself from Chuka, fearing that his love would weaken his resolve. Chuka noticed the change and asked his mother why his father seemed so distant. Nneka, too, had noticed Okafor's growing silence, his faraway look, as though his mind was lost in a place she could not reach. "Your father is only tired," she assured Chuka, brushing back his hair. But deep down, Nneka worried. Okafor was a man of simple values, and this newfound quietness felt like an omen, a darkness she couldn't explain. Meanwhile, the stranger's words haunted Okafor in his waking hours. He would hear whispers among the trees, see shadows shifting as he walked, and feel an unnatural chill whenever he ventured into the forest alone. One evening, he returned from his walk, empty-handed and trembling. When Nneka asked what troubled him, he avoided her gaze. "It's nothing," he murmured, yet she saw a faint tear in his eye. The choice lay before him like a heavy stone, one he could not lift without breaking his heart. As weeks passed, the pull of wealth grew stronger within Okafor, gnawing at him day and night. He found himself returning to the place where he'd met the stranger, hoping to catch another glimpse of him. It was as if the very forest had begun whispering to him, murmuring promises of gold and wealth beyond imagination. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the stranger reappeared, stepping out from the shadows with the same dark smile. "I see you have come again, Okafor," he greeted, his voice soft but powerful. "Have you made your choice?" Okafor's heart pounded as he felt the weight of the moment. He looked down, afraid to meet the stranger's eyes, yet the lure of wealth was overpowering. "What must I do?" he whispered, his voice shaking. The stranger's grin widened as he spoke. "The price is simple, yet profound. All I ask for is your son's life, and in return, I grant you wealth that even kings would envy." Okafor closed his eyes, feeling a pang of sorrow. But his mind drifted to the thought of freedom from poverty, from a life of labor. Hesitantly, he nodded, sealing a fate he could scarcely imagine. Okafor returned home that night, his steps heavy with guilt and regret. Inside, he found Chuka fast asleep, his small hand curled around the toy Okafor had carved for him years ago. For a moment, he hesitated, the sight of his son's innocent face rekindling the love he felt. "Is this truly the price of wealth?" he asked himself, his heart torn. But as he looked around their modest home, filled with the signs of their struggles, he felt a pang of bitterness that dulled his doubts. A man's duty is to provide for his family, he told himself, swallowing the knot in his throat. The following morning, Okafor tried to go about his day as usual, but his spirit was restless, and his hands trembled as he walked. Nneka noticed the change, her worry growing with each passing day. "Okafor," she asked gently, "what troubles you? You seem different." Okafor forced a smile and reassured her that everything was fine, but the words felt hollow. Deep down, he knew there was no turning back. He had made a choice, and soon, the consequences would unfold. Chuka, oblivious to his father's internal torment, continued his days with boundless energy, helping Okafor with the palm wine and eagerly sharing tales with his friends. He admired his father's work and often dreamed of following in his footsteps. One evening, as they sat together under the starlit sky, Chuka asked, "Father, will you teach me everything you know so that I can one day become as strong as you?" Okafor felt his heart break at his son's innocent question. How could he teach him when he had already betrayed him? In an attempt to hide his guilt, Okafor ruffled Chuka's hair and smiled. "Of course, my son," he replied, his voice heavy. But inside, he felt the weight of his decision growing unbearable. Every laugh, every smile from Chuka reminded him of what he was about to sacrifice. Yet, the thought of the promised wealth kept him bound to his dark choice. Soon, this struggle will end, he thought, trying to reassure himself, though each word felt like a lie. The day of the fateful sacrifice grew closer, and Okafor became increasingly withdrawn, unable to look at his son without feeling a stab of remorse. Nneka grew suspicious, her instincts telling her that something was terribly wrong. One evening, she confronted him, her gaze steady and filled with worry. "Okafor, you have changed. What burden do you carry?" Okafor averted his eyes, unable to confess the truth. "It is only the weight of providing for us," he replied, trying to mask his guilt. But Nneka was unconvinced. She saw the sorrow in his eyes and felt a chill in her heart. Driven by her fears, Nneka decided to keep a close watch on her husband, hoping to discover the source of his unrest. Meanwhile, Okafor wrestled with the reality of his choice, knowing that his time was running out. The stranger's promise haunted him, his words echoing in the silence of the night. Though he longed to undo his agreement, the allure of wealth held him captive, and he could see no escape from the path he had chosen. As dawn broke, Okafor prepared himself for the deed he could no longer avoid. He led Chuka into the forest under the guise of teaching him new skills, a sad smile on his face as he looked at his son. Chuka was excited, oblivious to the dark intentions in his father's heart. "Father, what are we learning today?" he asked eagerly. Okafor struggled to reply, his words caught in his throat. How could he answer when he knew what awaited his innocent child? They ventured deeper into the woods until they reached a clearing where the sun barely reached through the thick canopy. There, the stranger awaited, his eyes glinting with satisfaction. "You have brought him," he said, his voice like cold steel. Okafor's hands trembled as he looked at his son one last time. But the promise of wealth, the end to his poverty, dulled his resolve, and he felt his heart harden as he took a step forward, preparing to carry out the darkest act of his life. As Okafor approached the stranger, he felt his soul waver, torn between his love for Chuka and the promise of wealth that seemed just out of reach. Chuka, sensing the tension in his father's stance, looked up at him with innocent curiosity. "Father, why are we here? What are we doing?" The boy's voice was filled with trust, a trust that cut deep into Okafor's heart. He tried to muster a response, but his throat closed up, and words failed him. The stranger, sensing Okafor's hesitation, stepped closer, his eyes piercing. "It is now or never, Okafor," the stranger murmured, his voice cold and unfeeling. "Wealth is within your grasp, but only if you are willing to make the sacrifice." Okafor clenched his fist, his entire body trembling. He remembered the years of struggle, the hunger, the debt that had plagued his family. But as he looked into Chuka's wide, trusting eyes, he felt the first cracks of regret begin to widen, threatening to shatter his resolve. Yet, the stranger's words lingered in his mind, chaining him to his decision. Just as Okafor raised his hand, poised to make the unthinkable choice, he was struck by a memory. He remembered the day Chuka had been born, the overwhelming joy he had felt as he held his son for the first time. That moment had been one of pure happiness, a memory untouched by hardship or sorrow. The strength of that memory made him hesitate, and his heart swelled with both love and anguish.